Hi, everybody. Welcome to the live stream. This event is about rethinking the campus. And I first want to start off by paying my respects to the First Nations people, the elders past, future, and emerging. And we're going to kick off today with 4 presenters. And I'm John McFarlane, co-founder of PlaceOS. And each presenter will focus on their key area within this university campus, smart campus, and rethinking the experiences on campus. The idea of this came together because PlaceOS is an integration platform, and we find ourselves working with many different vendors that have their own unique perspective on this area, and also service providers. And that's exactly who we brought together today. And with the input from a client, Charles Darwin University. So this group of people were not necessarily always working on the same projects together. And what's interesting about that is we can pick and choose things we're seeing across different industry verticals, across different projects, and across different markets as we work nationally and globally, and bring that together for our view on smart campus. And for PlaceOS, the campus has always been sort of at the heart of what we do. Myself and my co-founder, we started this business from the University of Sydney. And our first employee was also an employee at the University of Sydney. And our head of product design is from the university space as well. So within PlaceOS's DNA is university and campus experiences. But we're a platform that works in many industry verticals. And I think the campus itself has never been more ready for an integration platform that brings many things together. So we won't do any more of a sales pitch than that today. Today's all about ideas and hearing from people and their unique perspectives. So I want to jump straight in. We'll do Q&A at the end. I'll start with some questions. I encourage anyone watching this to ask questions in the chat that's available here. And first up, we have Chris from Cisco, who's going to go through the digital transformation of campus. Over to you, Chris.
And hello, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Chris Owens, and I've been working at Cisco for over 10 years now, and I work across the ANZ education sector, working with customers to identify how Cisco technology, along with our ecosystem partners like PlaceOS, can help the sector deliver the best educational outcomes. Firstly, I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respect to elders past and present. About 5 years ago, when my son Alex was in grade 1, he was labelled the naughty kid. He was disruptive in class, disruptive to others, and often refused to do his work. Fast forward a few years, and he was diagnosed with autism, and in particular with sensory challenges. In the end, we had to move him to another school, but looking back at his old school, he was in a small classroom, in a very old building made of sandstone, and with too many students in the one room. It was simply too noisy for him to be able to concentrate, and so his frustration and struggles really showed up as a kid, just being naughty and not doing as he was told. I'm sharing this with you because it reminds me of the importance to leverage the technology we have available to us now, such as ambient noise sensors in my son's example, to really ensure that the spaces in the campus is not only smart, healthy, and sustainable, but is an engaging and compelling environment that draws students in and helps them really achieve their best. So as we look to what has happened over the last few years and the impact that it has had on higher education, digital transformation has gone from a nice statement that everyone banters regularly to a must-do, especially as institutions look to build resiliency through technology. In this report shown here, commissioned by Cisco at the start of 2021, to understand how universities are reimagining teaching, research, administration, and campus design, it was called out by Australian university leaders that the future campus will have fewer people on site, will need to be more experiential and alive, will need to promote health and wellbeing, have more porous boundaries with industry, and be more automated and efficient. And we're definitely starting to see some of these changes happening now. Since that report was written, the work and learning environment has evolved, bringing with it additional challenges that will shape the campus experience going forward. First up, hybrid work and learning. As these start to normalise for us, how we get used to it, how do universities build a culture and a unique value proposition in what's becoming a more competitive market, and what does that mean for the campus? It's pretty clear from the conversations that I've had with a number of universities that just getting students back on campus and building that culture and that on-campus experience is a real challenge these days. Students are liking the greater flexibility available to them. For example, why spend 2 hours on public transport to get to and from the campus for a 1-hour lecture when it's there to watch online? On the flip side, what lecturer wants to present to a virtual class with all the cameras off? There's no engagement and they feel like they're talking to themselves. A phrase that I've heard quite a few times of late is, how can we ensure that we give students a valued return on investment in their commute? Which is a stark contrast from when I was at uni. Back then I didn't have a choice but to be on campus and experience all it had to offer. Maybe sometimes a bit too much, and then I'd have to beg my friends for their notes. Anyway, despite the challenges, embracing hybrid work and learning does create massive advantages for institutions, such as efficiencies, retention of talent, and access to a broader pool of resources. Similarly, for learners, there's great opportunity for improved engagement and, of course, flexibility and greater work life or study life integration. If we look at the environmental challenges, the question is now being asked as to, well, what is the role of the physical campus in education? The rise of the recognition of the importance in sustainability and the key role our higher education institutions will play. How will the campus evolve to not only be a sustainable entity itself, but be a platform for research and innovation to ensure we can reach our net zero goals? As mini cities in their own right, a university campus is a perfect platform to develop, in partnership with industry, the technology that we're going to need to reach net zero. As we look to the campus design specifically and how the campus is being used, the design and construct of spaces is being challenged and reimagined from the traditional lecture theatre and classroom setup to more collaborative and innovative designs, similar to what we're seeing happen in other industries where hybrid work is being normalised. Given this trend, there will need to be greater flexibility and agility in the underlying infrastructure to enable those physical spaces, however they may change and evolve. And then there's a consideration of safety and wellbeing on campus. This must be a high priority when considering the on-campus experience. And on the back of the latest National Student Survey, Student Safety Survey, it's pretty clear that there's room for improvement. To me, given some of the stats in this report, and with 2 teenagers looking to go to university in a few years, it's a bit scary. But like my son and his challenges at school, the technology is available now to try and improve student safety and wellbeing. And lastly, technological challenges. Like analytics, tech-like analytics, artificial intelligence and machine learning, and pick a buzzword you can think of, the use of big data, and not to mention AR and VR. These are already influencing the pedagogies of today, and this is only expected to increase. What is really interesting is that the expectation of employers in regards to digital skills across all industries is also increasing. Digital-ready graduates are now a must. So this begs a question as to what's next and what will be expected to be supported by the campus infrastructure by academics, teachers and students both today and tomorrow. And not much needs to be said about cybersecurity these days. I think the last few breaches and exposure of private and personal data has been covered sufficiently in the news over the last month or so. And the critical infrastructure bill only adds to the obligations of universities to ensure security is intrinsically part of the infrastructure. But as we look to evolving technology, the campus needs to support whatever may come securely and intelligently, not only to protect vital intellectual property and personal data, but also protect a brand and reputation in what is now an increasingly competitive market. So what does all this mean? Given the constant state of change and uncertainty, what this highlights is that the importance of a digital foundation that will not only allow a university to adapt and innovate, but also to be able to deliver the array of digital services that can enhance and enrich the campus experience today. This digital foundation will enable the campus to be more flexible and dynamic, all the while ensuring it is healthier, safer and smarter, sustainable and with security embedded in, not bolted on. With the right digital foundation comes greater intelligence, for example, about the physical environment via sensors and users or devices within it, for example, via Wi-Fi data. This intelligence can be harnessed firstly to make more informed decisions about the use of real estate, but more importantly, drive the smart technology of tomorrow. Smart technology that can bring the Apple-like experience to the physical world and how we interact with it, with greater use of AI that puts the campus experience at the centre of the picture. Even now, the intelligence that can be gathered from the foundation, from this digital foundation, about user devices, as well as being a platform for ever-expanding IoT devices, can be used to deliver real business outcomes around student engagement, safe place to work, and sustainability. With this intelligent foundation, we can rethink the campus experience and inspire the academics and students, not only today, but into the future.
Thanks, Chris. I've got a few questions, but I'll save them to the end. Actually, I'll ask you one now that you can answer at the end, and our audience has to wait to the end of the presentation.
Sure.
The first question I'm going to ask you in the Q&A will be, how does a digital experience on campus lower the barrier to entry to university education? And I saw you post something recently, you shared an article about how the enrollments are falling, and the number of enrollments in the US in particular for university education is falling, and perhaps that's because the barrier to entry is so high for universities. I'd love to discuss later in the Q&A how digital plays a role in maybe lowering that barrier to entry for university education. But next we have Stephen from NTT. So Stephen's going to talk about something I personally like to talk about a lot as well, is transferring ideas and thinking and features from technology from one industry vertical to the other. I think right now workplace and universities have a similar challenge in that they're trying to work out or redefine themselves today and what the physical space can be and what it should be. So over to you, Stephen.
Yes, Stephen Wilkins from NTT. What I want to talk about today is we're going to reference a project that NTT has done up here in sunny Queensland, where we've actually implemented a lot of smart technology through a building, working with Suncorp, a large bank assurance group. And I want to talk about what we've learned from that and how that can maybe inform a smart campus. But just quickly before that, just 1 minute about me to try and give me some credibility. So currently running professional services at NTT Queensland, did a whole bunch of time in London and the UK. Came over here, and one of the first big programs that I got involved with around the smart building was the 1 William Street building, which is where Queensland government is based up in Brisbane. Back in its time, when that was being designed in 2014, that was sort of the smartest we could get, and high density Wi-Fi, a level of wayfinding through that, the best VC you could do at the time. But it's amazing how much we've moved on in the last 7 years, and so then. And more recently, in the last year, I've been working with Suncorp and working with PlaceOS and Cisco and ProAV as a partner for the Heritage Lanes program, which they used to call Brisbane HQ, but I think it upset a lot of people in Sydney. But that's it. It's an awesome building. It's very modern, and they've done some really interesting things with technology, which I'll talk about shortly. And I'm really quite passionate. I run the program up in NTT Queensland that we've launched just relatively recently to try and make our own NTT buildings, which also use the PlaceOS platform, the best places they can be, so our staff want to be there, want to engage, and want to use the facilities that they were designed for. Not just come into the office because the office is there, but come in for a reason, so it's purposeful. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So I have a view that the challenges that a corporate workplace faces and a campus faces are very similar indeed. They're different stakeholder groups, but similar challenges. And I just mentioned before, about using the resources and using them because they're going to give you a benefit, not just because the meeting room is there or not just because the collab space is there, but what do I want to do with those spaces? And so make sure that we have the right spaces and the right resources and the right facilities, and that people come in and use them for what they were designed. That then will give you a more attendance at the campus, and that's one of the things that's been quite interesting in the engagement with Suncorp and actually with the government building precinct, is especially in a post-COVID world. You've got a bunch of service providers in those precincts and on the university campus, such as cafes, pharmacies, library services, even laundry services. Viability becomes a problem unless you have a reasonable attendance, physical attendance by people. And so there's a challenge around that, and interestingly, we're working with some clients who are using the app and this solution about how do we integrate with a cafe that, say, for example, has a promotion on 2 till 3 p.m. It's half price coffees. How do you message that within the building app? We also talk about making the building easy, safe, and a joy to use. And so easy just means trying to take away the difficulties. And I'll talk a little bit about getting rid of all these cards that people have in a little bit, but also making it a safe place. That's something we're also working with our clients on. We don't have this right now in the app, but having a duress alarm that it pinpoints exactly where you are and goes straight through to building security. That sort of physical safety, making sure that lights automatically switch on. That's relatively simple and done in a lot of buildings using sensors, but also making it a real joy to be within the facility. Other challenges that we share are actually making sure that we're efficient and that we're not wasting resources, and that the spaces are right size for the people that are going to use them. And the data from that we can get can inform the future. What do we need in our buildings in the 12 months, 3 months, 5 years sort of journey? It's interesting working with Suncorp. So they've rolled out the technology in the main building here in Brisbane, and it's being rolled out to some other satellite corporate sites, but it's informing the design of their Melbourne and Sydney refreshes. It's been interesting that the sort of open air collaboration spaces that got quite sort of trendy, if I can say that, in the last 5 years, they're not actually used as much as people think. And we're seeing that with some of our other clients. People actually like to not disturb other people and be in a closed space. So those sorts of learnings, and we get some of that through the occupancy data that's through the PlaceOS platform, where we can surface. So that will inform good design decisions for buildings down the line. And I think Sabrina's going to talk a little bit about the data analytics and the benefits you get from that later on in the session. So smart workplaces, what did we actually do? Digital ID, I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. It's got its own slide. Resource optimization, and that's getting the right facilities and right sizing those right facilities and having the right level of meeting rooms. If there's only so many large 20-seat meeting rooms you actually don't need very many, because you don't often get 20 people in that situation. You might need a larger, more auditorium space. That sort of thing to get what are the resources that we need, how much is it going to cost, and informing those good decisions. Wayfinding and location services, interesting spirited debate we had with Suncorp around the value of this, because it's quite a lot of effort to put in. But people are using it. They do like to know where their colleagues are. They do want to find them. When you're in a 40-story building that's free-seated all the way throughout, it's useful rather than just phoning them. And in talking to my daughter, she's second year at QUT up here, she uses snap maps to find where her friends are. Now, snap maps isn't actually that accurate. So she actually saw the value in this inner campus to work out where her friends are. Obviously, there's a level of privacy concerns and sharing data that you have to go through on that. But there is a use there for it, and a use also for finding important resources, safety resources, emergency muster areas, fire extinguishers, those good things. And purpose drive, it's difficult to articulate this, but I'm hoping people understand what I mean, that you need to make people feel they're there for a reason. Getting people back into the Suncorp workplace, which was an aim for them, was difficult to achieve just by saying, thou shalt come to the office because it's there. You had to give people a reason and go, well, these facilities are here. We're going to run a workshop. We're going to do an agile elaboration session, and we're going to do this in this meeting room, and we've got this technology and this digital whiteboard to help drive that experience. So I want to talk a little bit about digital identity. Now, these are real photos from the building in Suncorp, where we drove everything so to get away from these and use this. And that has its challenges for the techies out there. There are a number of challenges on the Apple iOS platform using NFC, but that works today. And so Suncorp are deprecating the use of these physical cards. They still have them as a backup at the moment, but they're trying to move away from that. But the majority of staff use their phone to access the building, to book their resources, to book their car parking space. So it's all driven through the app of the phone. But at the heart of that is the digital identity. I was interested talking to one of our university clients up here in Queensland, and he reckons they've got potentially over 3,000 different locks across their 3 campuses, and that's physical locks. Now, this obviously takes away all of that, and it's all managed from a central place. But digital identity, that's the first step in the journey that we've done with our clients up here, is moving to that. That unlocks a number of different capabilities. I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide because I'm not a huge technical person, but I have an understanding of the architecture of how PlaceOS works and what it does straight out the box, and what extra stuff you can customize on top of it. So we're working closely with PlaceOS for the custom drivers that we wrote for Suncorp to fold those into the PlaceOS platform. But what I will talk a little bit about this, so this is a bit of an eye chart. It's not the best slide, but I nicked it off one of our enterprise architects. This sort of covers what the solution is at its heart. And so we have a web app, we have the mobile phone app. That's then talking to the platform, which is integrating the AV rooms, so you can book them, you can start meetings, you can customize your meeting requests. It also actually learns what height you set your desk to when you tap in at a certain desk. It integrates your lockers. It allows you to book your car park. It allows you to be notified when you've got mail and parcels in the mail room in the building. It produces a raft of data that can be used then by the buildings and facilities folk to do their analytics and reporting and inform their better choices down the line. And that is my timer going off, so I'll stop that. Conscious of time, you already said to keep it to 10 minutes. So that is in a nutshell what the solution does and is in place now. And I think that's something I want to reiterate. This isn't future stuff. This is right here, right now. And so to wrap up, what can the Smart Campus learn? So I'll go back to what I said before. If you make it easy and safe and a joyful experience, people will engage better with resources, have a better experience, and I hope have a better learning experience on a campus, much as they have a better corporate output experience in the workplace. The amount of data you get is rich and is very useful, and is already in these case studies already informing their fit out and their expenditure for their other buildings. Now, I haven't talked much about efficiency and sustainability, and I think that's going to be covered off a little bit by Sabrina, and Chris touched on it. But within the building management software that PlaceOS integrates to, you can get rich data and control to reduce your environmental footprint, to reduce water consumption, energy consumption, and be able to forecast and predict what you're going to use in those spaces. And that word purposeful, again, I initially rejected that when we started doing the architecture for Suncorp a year or so ago. But it now does resonate with me, and it resonates with me as I'm wearing my NTT hat in engaging our staff to engage with our facilities and get the best out of them. And so I have that at the back of my mind all the time. Why would someone come in today to use what resource and make that available and make it help them and have a purposeful, enjoyable experience? And that is all I wanted to cover off today. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. I like the purposeful. It's almost like a sanity check for all your user experiences, right? Are we doing this for the right reasons? In workplace, one of the things I always bring up is a lot of people want to know utilization of meeting rooms. And my question to them is always, do you have too few meeting rooms or too many meetings? Because that data only gives you information on one of those things, and the purposeful part of it is what needs to come into play. Like, maybe we don't need to look at this data and say this is going to feed this model to have more meeting rooms. We might look at our culture and change the way we're operating, and I think universities can take that as well. Like, do we need these types of spaces? or are we just looking at data and responding to data without adding purpose or context? To talk more about the specific challenges, and Sabrina, maybe if you start sharing the screen now so Geordie can get that ready on the stream. But Sabrina's going to cover some of the sort of core elements where there's challenges and opportunities, and that's space, energy, and experience, and those three things working together. So Sabrina, I'll pass over to you, and we'll have more questions at the end.
Great, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. So I'm Sabrina, Chief Operating Officer at PlaceOS, and we work with a lot of universities, as John mentioned at the beginning. Because universities are such complex places, they're very large physical spaces, and there's a lot of different stakeholder groups. There's a lot of different challenges that come up. But what I found, especially over the last year or so, everything kind of comes back to three main categories, which is space, energy, and experience. So I'm going to talk about those three challenges today, and then also talk about how that's been, resolved and how we're working on that with a few different case studies. So the first one, space. Here are some of the common questions we get asked day to day. I have too much space. What do I do with it? Which of my spaces are actually being utilized? What do I do with the space that I don't need anymore? We're now doing hybrid learning. What types of spaces do we need more of and less of on campus? We're moving to activity-based working. How many desks do we need? How do we support our staff on this change? Energy. We get asked questions like, how can we improve the energy efficiency of spaces? How can we reduce our energy costs? How can we meet our sustainability goals? How much energy and utilities are we consuming? And how do we perform compared to the industry benchmarks? Where should we be aiming towards? And lastly, user experience. So uni's asking us what is actually important to our students. How can we get people back to campus, or what do we want to get them back to campus for? We're moving to activity-based working. What do our staff actually want? What will help them do their job more efficiently or in a better way? How do we make our spaces frictionless? I know Stephen spoke a little bit about this as well, trying to make everything seamless. How do we make it easy to use? You can be any type of user, walk into any type of space and have it activate. And how can we differentiate from other universities through technology and through digital experience? So we're going to talk about how to address all of those challenges, but I just wanted to start on one thing to not do, which is one mistake we see customers across every industry vertical making from time to time, which is focusing on technology and data before understanding what they actually want to do with the data. And we've spoken about this in terms of, purpose or context. And it's a really easy trap to fall into where we just focus on collecting so much data. We've got all of these problems and we just think, let's pull this together in dashboards and then work out what we do with that data. But a lot of that can end up being really meaningless, or we can end up deploying additional technology when we've already got that data and duplicating effort and wasting resources. So how can we actually address all of these different challenges? There's a three-step process that we work on with our customers at PlaceOS and through our channel partners. Firstly, understanding the desired outcome. You've got a problem, what do you want as the resolution? So it could be something like identify what is the actual utilization and occupancy of meeting rooms, or we want to improve room energy efficiency by 5%, or we want to transform our underutilized spaces into a different type of space or something we can rent out to other businesses or something like that. The second step is to then, once you've got your outcome, come back to the technology and data sources that you already have. So what data do you have? You've probably got a Wi-Fi system potentially with real-time location services, conference equipment, security swipe card data, which can tell us about access and occupancy, timetabling information, which can give us intent for using spaces, AV systems, HVAC, lighting, sensors, your Office 365 or Google environment, and any other database that you have. So there's a huge amount of data already sitting there that might be, underused. And then once you've identified all of that data, you can then start to identify the gaps. Okay, where do we actually need maybe some additional sensors or additional data? But also not forget to use automation as much as possible. So we've got all of these great systems, but if they're not interoperable and working together, then that results in a lot of manual user input. So we have facilities managers who have to look at the timetabling system and then go into the HVAC system and turn off a standard schedule. And we don't want that. So we want to use technology to automate the way those systems work together. And we'll talk about some examples of that. So the first example that I wanted to go through is a little bit about what we're doing with Charles Darwin University. We've got Malcolm here today who's going to go into this in a little bit more detail, but they did a really great job of following this exact same process. So what we're looking at here is a mind map from our initial scoping session. So we spent some time on discovery, understanding what are the problems for all of the different stakeholder groups. So even as a technology vendor, we didn't say, implement this. We said, tell us more about your problems. So we started at the top of this mind map, firstly identifying all of the different users, and we identified quite a few. So of course, students are really central, but we've also got a lot of different types of staff. So we've got teaching support staff who need to make the space ready. We've got the actual teaching academic staff who are running the lectures and classes. We've got non-executive staff, so people like HR and executives who are looking for more of that workplace kind of experience. That's their core problem, having meetings and making those work efficiently. We've got the visitors and community, so a lot of external people are coming onto campus. Of course, facilities and operations, making sure those buildings are running optimally, fixing issues, maintenance and life cycle of the building. And then tenants. So a lot of universities do have business campuses or external organizations who rent out spaces on their campus, and we need to account for them too. So once we had all of those identified, we then started to identify what are the specific problems for every single stakeholder. So for students, it could be something like digital ID. We don't want, as Stephen said, 10 different swipe cards to get into different buildings if I need to get into the library or into this special lab environment. And we can control that and automate that and make that really simple through, making that accessible on a user's phone and connecting that to your corporate and student databases to understand who these people are and what spaces they have access rights to. Or it could be something like even providing space feedback. So, if, as we know, unis are such large places, it's hard to keep track of all of the different things. Is this tap broken, or is the AV system in this room offline, or something like that? So being able to just ad hoc provide feedback and have that actioned really quick was an interesting use case that came up. In contrast, facilities are much more concerned with the environmental automation, and we'll talk about that in the next case study, so that we don't have people having to manually, manage climate control or the AV control within a lecture theatre environment, and then having seamless reporting and analytics across all of this technology. So once we've got all of those issues outlined, then we came back to technology and said, okay, what integrations, what data already exists? And these are all of the integrations that are already going to be provisioned as part of this building. Everything from the base building systems to the student timetabling system and other student systems, and then all of the corporate technology in between. And what's missing here is the lines from these integrations off to those relevant user experiences. This mind map in the real one is much more complex and larger than this. But then we can just start to feed those integrations into the user experiences. And before you know it, that's how you've got a smart campus. So yeah, I'll leave that one there. Malcolm will go through that in a little bit more detail. But speaking specifically about another one of the key challenges we spoke about earlier, which was energy efficiency and operational efficiencies, particularly in the lecture theatre environment. That's what we focused on with McMaster University. So still followed that same process, and they've got some really ambitious goals for a smart campus, but they decided to initially start small and look at one type of space, which is the lecture theatre environment. So they've got a mix of really old legacy technology and brand new technology across all of their various spaces. But they want to be able to do things like reduce energy consumption in rooms, progress towards their net zero carbon goal, improve the operational efficiency of those spaces and create a frictionless experience for the lecture theatre occupants, and also improve the physical security of those spaces. So just to set the context, an example is one type of lecture theatre space they have is climate controlled from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single day. It's also unlocked for that period of time. So what that means is that you have one lecture theatre which is operating or running for 85 hours per week. But when they looked at the timetabling data, it was clear that that space was only booked for 35 hours per week. So that's only 1/3 of that space is actually being, or 1/3 of the time that space is being utilized. So therefore that space is being powered for the other 2/3, there's no one in that room, and we're utilizing utilities to run that space. So by simply just understanding what technology we have in that room, we've got the HVAC system, we've got AV systems, we've got the security swipe card system, we've got the timetabling system. A user can look at all of that data and see, what needs to be turned on or off. But we implemented PlaceOS to be able to provide that next level of automation to say, we know that the room isn't scheduled to be used for a further 2 hours, so let's actually shut that room down and turn everything off. And that's what we're doing now, which is the ROI really stacks up for one room alone. If we're saving 60% of that room's energy consumption, as soon as you multiply that out across a campus, you can start to achieve those sustainability and energy goals really, really quickly, as well as creating a better user experience for the meeting room occupants, because through that automation, everything turns on, including the AV, 5 minutes prior to their booking starting. So they don't have to come in and try and find all of the different touch panels or switches in the room. It's completely frictionless, and we're meeting sustainability goals while we're at it. So no new technology there besides PlaceOS to connect all of the existing technology. So this is just an example screenshot from of one of these logic drivers that's been set up to actually power that space. So just a few different rules. And the other thing I wanted to touch on here is that it doesn't have to be complex, or we don't need AI or ML to drive these automations in university campuses. I think that's one misconception, that to have a smart campus, you need a really complex technology stack. But to achieve the automation I spoke about, it's really just 3 or 4 different logic drivers or triggers, should I say, to basically say, if this condition happens, then let's make this happen. So that's a really, really quick implementation process and no complex or expensive AI technology there. So just a couple of takeaways from my session today. Try to focus on outcomes, not data first. Audit your existing technology and understand what you already have in place. There's probably a lot of data there. Use automation as much as possible to create that frictionless user experience and improve your operational efficiencies. And just try to get started with something. Smart campus is a huge topic, but you can plan big and start small, and then you'll be taking steps to move along that process. Thank you.
Thanks, Sabrina. So one of the questions I'm going to have for you, so I'm giving everyone their first question now, but don't answer until we're doing the Q&A, is what challenges are you seeing across the university space in different markets, Australia versus Canada, for example? You just gave 2 examples of universities, one from Australia, one from Canada. I'd love to hear how they differ, and are the challenges the same? Do you see the landscape in Australia more innovative than overseas markets? So that will be one for you and the group as well. But next up is Malcolm from CDU, Charles Darwin University. So Malcolm's our main event today. We're very fortunate to have him here, giving us insights into the new campus, the CBD campus in Darwin, and some of the thinking on what led to this project, how it's going. So I'm just going to throw over to you, Malcolm, and I'm sure we'll discuss more towards the end.
So my name's Malcolm Caldwell. I work as a solutions architect. I was promised when I started in this role title of Solutions Architect Smart Digital Environments, which is a great title, but my title as it sits in our systems is Solutions Architect Networks. That's my background. I have a background in infrastructure and infrastructure across a lot of the technology areas, traditional networking, AV, etc. It's good to be here. It's interesting today to be at the end of this presentation, because a lot of the things that I wanted to say have been said, but I'll underline those. It's also interesting. It would have been good. We'll go through this journey that we've been going on, that Sabrina talked about, building this new campus, and had been great 2 years ago to have had these presentations, because it really feeds into the journey that we've gone through and the questions we've had to ask ourselves. I'll start with a little bit about Charles Darwin University. We're a university centred in the Northern Territory, in Darwin. We have 5 campuses. look, the number of campuses changes as definitions of what a campus change, but we've got 5 main campuses, 7 centres. These are across Australia. So our campuses in Darwin, Katherine, Alice Springs, and in Sydney. Multiple sites in the Darwin area, sites in Brisbane, smaller sites across the place. So at one stage we were up to 26 locations that were delivering services. But now I think it's slightly less, but it's growing again. So around that number. We're a dual sector university, so that means that we higher education and vet programs. They have similarities, but some differences, and also differences in how they're adopting these technologies and paces. It's hard to say without a firm definition of what online learning is, but we've been on this journey for a long time. I said 20 plus years there, to the point that the majority of our students, particularly in higher education, are online only. I don't have an exact number. It's probably 75, maybe 80% of our students are online only. And we had because of this, and the reason that we're like that is because of our catchment area. Darwin is a small area. If we were to try to be a university and only pull from the Northern Territory, we wouldn't survive. There just isn't the numbers. So we very early realised that sort of like an island state mentality, that we had to go out to bring the business into us. And the way to do that was with online learning, and the way to do that was with online learning when some of the other universities were moving slower and didn't go after the areas. And we did teaching in areas that other universities thought weren't possible. Online nursing is a particular example that we pursued early, realising that there are ways that you can teach nursing online and involving blocks and things like that. So we got to the point where there was a policy that every course that we offered in higher education had to be able to be offered online as well as physically. Which was really good when there was a pandemic, because really it was business as usual. We just told the students that were coming to campus that they had to participate now from home, and largely they did. But as was said earlier today in the presentation, the challenge has been to get them to come back, and it's certainly an interesting thing. We have a lot of digital systems that the students use. I call that online enrolment. It sounds quite trivial, but it was an example. We were one of the first universities to actually automate and put online our enrolment process. Students are typically using learning management systems. We use Blackboard, video collaboration technologies. So we're using Blackboard's Ultra, the product. But also, like everyone else, there's online meeting systems, and these are increasingly being used, things like Teams and Zoom. There's ad hoc tools that the students are using, so Pebbleboard, and they're using polling software. Lots of innovative tools that are used. And look, everyone's using email and using all the other systems. But the point I want to make is that there isn't this divide between a physical university with campuses and the online experience, particularly where the majority of your students are actually only online. So I tell people we're a online business with a small shop front. It's something it's a concept that even a lot of the university staff are still grappling with. The question is, and this is actually probably the most important slide that I have, is why have a campus? And the reason is that if you want to make a good campus, if you want to have a smart campus that it's worth having, you've got to answer this fundamental question: well, what is it that the campus is trying to achieve? And we've got the universities in Europe 400 years old, odd more, some of them. But this question is very relevant today to Charles Darwin University and to all the other universities as well. So first of all, it's workplace, and it was the presentation earlier about the workplace. Look, all the questions that you have about workplaces and making them efficient are valid to the university. And then there's the other activities, the teaching activities, the research activities, and all the other activities. Obviously, you need to have campus needs to have specialist equipment. So labs of various description, the medical programs have a combination of labs and simulations. Vet is and trades, which we teach. We're not going to go to a point where a plumber has never, used a wrench. They will always need to come and spend time at a physical campus to do that kind of work. Simulations, AR, VR, all these things are becoming increasingly important. But I want to say the main reason that to have a campus is because the students still want a rich campus environment. I think the rich is key, because if it's just to sit in the back of a lecture theatre and listen to someone talking, 9 out of 10 times they'll decide to do that from home if they've given the choice. My own children are a bit older than I think it was Chris this morning was talking. They're at university here at Charles Darwin University. At the start of the pandemic, when the lectures moved to being online only, they started doing university from bed. And I don't know if I could have done that, to be honest. I don't think it was hard enough to stay awake when sitting in the lecture theatre sometimes in my classes, particularly some of the maths classes. But that's the way it is. And we don't have a 2-hour commute. It's a 10-minute commute to our campus. But if what they're participating is just a class where they sit and don't talk for 2 hours, then why do that from the campus? So the point is that the campus needs to have a value proposition. It needs to have a value to want people to come in. So what I want to say is that there's this idea of a hybrid campus where you realize that all the activities that happen are hybrid activities. So hybrid learning is talked about. We have a pedagogical model here that is promoted of polysynchronous learning. Polysynchronous learning means that during the sessions, it can be teacher to student, but often it'll be flipped and it'll be student to student, and it'll be working in small groups and breaking up into groups. And this polysynchronous aspect is that it's a combination of real time and also offline. So traditional LMSs, there'll be a lot of forum chats and all the rest of it, but mixing that in with real time. The challenge is to do that in a way where you've got a hybrid environment, where there's some students that are in the classroom and some students that are at home, and then you want many-to-many kind of collaborations happening at the same time. But I think another important thing about the hybrid campus is that the university is more than just about teaching. The research activities are important, and the community aspects are important. Sabrina talked when we're doing our mind mapping, and I think it's important to see that there are different groups of users. There's the staff, of course, and the different roles they fill. The students, through their journey as students, from being undergraduates, postgraduates. We have partners that work with us, tenants as well as in some cases just partners, and that's very much a part of how universities work in terms of the collaborations with industry and collaborations with other universities and cooperative research centres, etc. The public and alumni. Now, alumni is one that wasn't on Sabrina's slide earlier because it's something that we've identified more strongly recently. But it's not a lot different from public in one sense, particularly in somewhere like the Northern Territory, where a large percentage of the population of the Northern Territory are alumni of the CDU. It's a very high number across the particular long-term residents of the Northern Territory, and they have a connection back to the university, which should be more than just remembering which lectures they fell asleep in back in the day, and is more. And look, certainly this alumni, there's an aspect around obviously fundraising kind of activities, but there's also an aspect of a pride in the university and a connection to the site. So what are we doing? And our answer is the ECP, the Education and Community Precinct. This is a new campus that is being built in Darwin City, right in the CBD. It's part of the City Deal initiative. Federal government, state, and local governments participating together to bring life into the city. And this move of Charles Darwin University to this ECP is key to that. In fact, I think it's the most important thing. I don't know what else they could have done to give a similar impact in terms of revitalising the Darwin CBD as this project that they're doing with the ECP. This will see approximately half of the activities of Charles Darwin University is from our existing Casuarina campus, which is in the suburbs, moving into the city. The ECP will have the traditional university teaching facilities, office space for staff, but also very much focused on the community aspects as well. So the CDU Art Gallery is moving into this location, which is great because although it's a good collection and very good exhibitions, out in the suburbs, look, I've been in there and I haven't seen anyone else in there most of the time. So it would be great to see that. The Northern Territory Library, which is basically our state library, but we're not a state, it's the Northern Territory Library, is also moving in as a tenant and a partner into this place. The spaces that are being built into the ECP include the lecture theatre will be available for performances. There's festival learning spaces and bookable spaces for the community to come in and come and use. And this is in progress, being built. That's a fairly recent photo of the site, and to be completed in 2024. I'll just go through some of the renders that we've got, so we can get a bit of the vision. I won't spend a lot of time looking at this because, look, I think they're very pretty and attractive, but they don't really speak to us much about this campus environment. The building is set up. It's one large building with a large floor print at this stage. So we're starting with this building. There's a challenge around the site, which is an interesting one, that there's a heritage-listed boab tree right back in the middle of the site. And so the building itself is designed around this tree, which is a challenge, but it's one that's good. The tree has its historical connection. So the site that it's on, although it was a car park for the last 20 years or more, 30 years, was actually the site of the original Darwin Primary School and Adult Migrant Education Centre. And this tree has been there for 100-something years, so it's seen all that history. Some renders of the inside, obviously tropical, looking out into the information. As I said, the CDU Art Gallery, looking to move. Render of what the classrooms may look like. And another one. So the question is, how do we achieve this role? We've got this opportunity with the ECP to build this new site, taking in all the things that were talked about this morning and by the other presenters and the current challenges. How do we achieve this role of this hybrid campus? As this environment that works for all. And the first thing that it's important is to say that a smart building isn't one where the facilities guy can look at a dashboard. That's great for the facilities guy, but it's got to be smart for all the users. It's got to be smart for the students. It's got to be smart for the staff, for the community members that come in. The note that the best technology often disappears. And what do I mean by that? You don't want to be marveling at how great the user interfaces is. You want to be using the space. It's like an Apple Watch. You probably don't even realize you're using it, but you're using it all day. It's that kind of address. Privacy concerns are important. We're talking about finding people, for instance, location awareness. You need to be aware of the social contract you have when you're using that kind of information, and letting users decide that they do want to be sharing these things. Mobile centric, the mobile phone is the supercomputer in the pocket and is key. We talked this morning about mobile identity, for mobile phones to give identity, and the location awarenesses and the things that they give. These are some of the things that technologies are used that put into this space. So we looked at some of the use cases, and look, we could talk about them for a long time, but a lot of them come out. I wanted to just more classify them. Finding a suitable space, booking meeting rooms, booking classrooms, booking workspaces comes important, and utilising the resources well. We are in the tropics here in Darwin. It's not pleasant outside today. A large part of the university's operational budget goes into power, so we can get great wins from utilising our space more. And that means not doing what we have been done traditionally, which is that 6 months before a subject runs, we try to guess how many people will be in that. We book an appropriate size space and then keep using that for a semester. Interacting with the space, so the AV, the lighting, the climate, putting people, the users back in control of the environment they have. There's endless wars in our buildings here between people who feel too cool from the air conditioning and people who don't feel more cool enough from the air conditioning. People trying to balance the air conditioning themselves by opening windows, and it's actually a big challenge, and it's just putting people back in control. We talked about finding people before. It's about not just about finding your friends. It's also finding the lecturer. It's a very real problem for students to be able to find the lecturer who increasingly doesn't sit in their office. They're mobile. They're around about. They're working from home some of the time, and it's a very productive way for it. But you do need this ability to find the right people, either online or in physical. And I was going to say about wayfinding and what I call just-in-time wayfinding. Look, if you get to university or if you're enrolled in a trade course or a vet, you're pretty smart. After the first week, you know where to go for your class. So what is the use of wayfinding? But this gets to the point of what I mean by just-in-time wayfinding. If we can get to the time where instead of running a lecture with not enough seats because they had more enrolments, and then a room down the corridor having a huge lecture theatre with only 5 people in it, if we can make decisions in real time and move those around, that means that we can utilise our space better and give a better environment to everyone. The intelligence that we gain from various systems should be able to move the AV, which the AV should be automated so that you can make the decision on the day. Through the app, tell everyone where the class is now moved to, and that's the time to put the wayfinding in front of them, so that when they're turning up 5 minutes late for their lecture, as they invariably do, that they find their class straight away. So that's what I mean by smart wayfinding. But my title was Beyond the Hybrid Campus. I'm saying beyond the hybrid campus because we need to lose the word hybrid. This is how the campuses are going to be. It really means about removing the lines between the physical and virtual worlds, remembering that they're all part of the one university, the one system. Frictionless technology, which has come up from the other presenters today, and it needs to be engaging. And I'll finish with a security footage of a boab tree showing that it's in the middle of a construction site, but it's doing really great.
Thank you, Malcolm. So we're going to go straight into questions, and I encourage the other panelists to unmute the mic and ask any questions of the other panelists. But starting with you, Malcolm, you mentioned many different stakeholders there. When we do work in corporate workplaces, we have the luxury of someone representing the users from the human resources department, for example. How do you navigate that in university where you don't necessarily have someone with the role of workplace experience designer internally? There's many different stakeholders there. How do you manage that?
It's certainly a challenge. Look, we get out and we have people that are out working in various faculties. So we're very centralised here in terms of our IT approach. But we do make sure that we have people assigned to each of the faculties in each of the areas, and that they're having those conversations and bringing that experience back into the experience. We also, this ECP project and the smart or the hybrid campus environment, we've got a very positive relationship with our facilities people. Our head of facilities here is a very big believer in this whole project. He's invested in it as we are. And I think that's very important as well, because they're the ones that are out there taking the demands from the questions from the areas.
And who sets those goals? Are they set collectively? So do you get together as a group to set the ultimate goals of the university? Like you mentioned that one of the principles of Charles Darwin University is it has to be online, or it has to be hybrid to begin with. How does that get decided, and how does that impact the physical campus design?
That came out of the teaching and learning people here at the university, that's their job is working how the pedagogies work and the teaching and learning. And that fell out of a lot of so because we had this project with the ECP, and we did a lot of consultation at that stage, and so the outcomes of that input that would normally just go to the architects to work out how to build a building, we took on board and incorporated into the technology mix that's going there.
Yeah.
John,
Stephen,
yeah,
go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, I was going to chime in on that. I mean, you're touching on some areas around organisational change, which and certainly we work with our clients, and it tends to be the clients want to own the org change sort of a piece of the puzzle, but it's so important that you are getting that consultation, that information set from the various stakeholders, and that they go on the whole journey with you. What was really interesting in the Suncorp use case is we changed a lot through that. For those people who are involved, Sabrina was across a lot of it, that the requirements morphed and changed, and Suncorp were quite a mature organisation that knew that would take place. And as such, with that sort of change champion group they had, when we wanted to change, we did rapidly change the solution as we learned more, because there's a bunch of unknown unknowns that you just don't know when you're going into it, because it's a new world order. But that group of change champions that a lot of organisations have set up anyhow. You know, if you've done an Office 365 rollout a few years ago, if you've done a Teams rollout, you'd have had people in the various parts of the organisation, wealth of experience and knowledge, and often those people are quite happy to talk up. But it was a key input into the success of both the Suncorp piece and some of the Queensland government work that we've done, that we had good stakeholder interaction all the way through the journey of the project.
And change is going to continue. What we've been putting in place is a framework that we know that in 5 years' time, the use cases will likely be completely different. And if we've got the right platform underneath, and we believe we do with PlaceOS, that means that we can make those changes as required. As the next set of challenges, it won't be a pandemic next time, but whatever the next set of challenges are, that we can move quickly.
I think, Malcolm, what was great to see out of Charles Darwin University was the way CDU went to market. So the RFPs were not feature-based, they were platform-based for exactly that reason. And this is something we see with many organizations where their quotation or the RFP or RFQ process eliminates the solution they actually need, because they're asking for features that might be redundant by the time the project is delivered. Stephen, I have a question for you on a related topic. So this transferable, like from workplace to university, there's some things that are easier in workplace and some things that are challenging compared to university. And I think one of the things that is a luxury working in workspace is the standardization of roles, and the scalability is very different to the scalability challenges at university campuses. So scaling, multinational or national rollouts for an organization is straightforward compared to the horizontal scale of a university campus. What do you think are some of the other challenges that transferring some of the workplace features to a university campus?
I think right at sort of at the beginning of this, I think actually understanding what the different stakeholders want. That's funny. I'm coming back to that all change piece.
Yeah,
you're right. In a corporate environment, there's a level of control and there's a level of already understood expectation in our higher education and further education areas. They're morphing quite rapidly at the moment, and you've got quite a number of you've got a broad thought base, if I can put it that way. You've got a lot of different ideas, a lot of people thinking different ways, whereas in the corporate world, people tend to be a little bit siloed in their thinking, which is good and bad. It's good when you're trying to predict and design resources and facilities for people to use. So I think that is a challenge. And in my conversation with Griffith University up here, they acknowledge that they've got quite a lot of disparate people that you might put as a stakeholder group, students, but in fact, there's a heck of a lot of different thoughts and different wants and different ways of interacting with physical resources. So I think that's a challenge. That how do you get something that meets the needs of the many? And a lot of work has got to be put in up front to understand what that is, and touch on what Malcolm was saying. What is it here for? What is the physical thing here for? So we know that if you're doing a medical course, there's some specific things you need to use, and how do we make that easy? We know if you're doing this, we know if you're doing that. So I see that as a difference. There's a lot more work in the campus sector to do that than there is in a corporate building, because the resource mix is relatively standardized. It's printers, meeting room, VC, the other.
I think some of the challenges there is taking the user on that journey without it being tedious. They don't want to be in 3-hour workshops every week spelling out what their needs are. But it is an essential part, because if you hear that from every stakeholder group, you'll see commonalities or also conflicting interests, which you wouldn't be able to identify if you didn't spend a lot of time on that UX upfront design work, which just makes the technology easier to roll out.
I think Sabrina touched on something about starting small, for example. So we're working with another organisation at the moment that isn't brave enough to go, well, bang, put in a big solution into their massive corporate office, but they're taking a smaller corporate office and go, why don't we put it in there? And then we'll learn. We can learn from that experience. And that's a valid approach as well, to try and overcome that challenge of you don't know what you don't know.
So Sabrina, I said I'll ask you about global differences between university requirements in Australia and other markets. But could you also add to that, what is the energy requirement seems to be a feature coming up more and more. How important is that to customers today?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask about the different markets and what their real drivers are in different markets. I've definitely noticed with our North America clients, so McMaster is in Canada, energy does seem to be a very high priority for them. So of course, student experience, getting people back to campus, workplace experience, those are all issues that they still have to tackle. But there does seem to be a lot of urgency around energy and sustainability, and what can we do, especially I think this is such a big challenge, because we've got these buildings that are retrofits, so we've got existing buildings with legacy technology, and it's not scalable or sustainable to just refit that out with all brand new technology. So that's probably why we're not, we haven't seen that specific use case be as front and center for CDU, because we've got a brand new building. So we've got the luxury of setting things up in a sustainable way from the get-go. But especially overseas, where we've got very, very old campuses, trying to pivot those campuses and make them sustainable in this modern world is a huge challenge, and something that we're seeing a lot more investment in over there. I think energy is still a huge topic in Australia, and we're seeing a lot more. We're seeing a lot more unis and a lot more organisations across all markets trying to put that front and centre with a lot of different benchmarks, and we've got Neighbours and Green Star, and there's a lot of processes that people can follow now to put that in place. But yeah, it does seem to be more so overseas where we're seeing that happening today, right now, with those older campuses.
And Chris, same sort of question to you. I know Cisco devices are now sort of can do many things, including monitor the environment. Are those features front and center? Is this related to comfort and environmental? And are you seeing an upward trend in this area?
Yeah, definitely seeing an upward trend. I guess it's more around, from our perspective, it's leveraging what you've already got. How can you leverage what you're already using in a modern environment to, I guess, supplement the demands to all the requirements of tomorrow, and sustainability being a good one, but comfort and understanding the environmentals. So I guess you're looking at what are you already going to deploy anyway? How can you complement that with the intelligence that it can provide, because it's going to be there anyway? And I guess it's interesting the point that Malcolm was making in regards to that tight interlock with facilities and other groups within the university. That's really going to make it such a great success. On the flip side, I've seen where if you don't have that interlock and you've got the quite siloed parts of the university looking at some of these capabilities, they're all very much that's nice, but we, as a purely IT team, we're not interested because it's not our concern. So it's well and good to have these newer capabilities that are getting that particular interest as sustainability becomes more and more important. And even on the energy aspects, yes, the sustainability aspects of reducing energy consumption, but then the cost associated with using energy is becoming an important factor too.
Yeah.
But unless the whole organisation is on board, you're not going to get all the benefits that you could get.
I'll stay on energy a little bit longer because I've got a question on the live stream related to this. But what is, just in general, across projects you have all been working on or aware of, what are some of the successes and failures with focusing on energy, or the outcomes, or the features? For example, I think that right now sometimes we're just putting energy features in so people can get a star rating, and they might turn it off. So they can say their energy is 5-star rated, or whatever the scale is in various markets. What examples have you seen that success, and what has failed?
I can chime in there. Well, in the projects that we're involved with, it's probably a little bit too early to tell, if I'll be perfectly honest, because we're not running long enough to do some comparison between the previous year's consumption and what we're looking at now, especially in the Suncorp case. It's a brand new building, so it's hard to, we haven't got a decent baseline. But it's certainly, as we all know, in the current geopolitical environment, it has been a very focusing point. I think in Australia, less focusing as it is as opposed to our European clients, where that is a very focusing event, reducing energy bills. And I'm sure that will trickle through to us in the coming months. But I think, so from where I sit at the moment, a bit too early to tell what's made it successful, but certainly the technology is all there, the capability is all there to do the best we can in minimizing energy consumption. So just consume the minimum to provide the experience that's required by the user base.
Yeah, and look, I'd echo that. In that particular, here in Australia, it is a bit too early to tell. But there are good examples overseas, ones that PlaceOS has been directly involved in, and obviously McMaster's is an excellent example. But then I guess what we've done with ASHRAE, or what you've done with ASHRAE as well, is another good example of where it's highlighted that it is possible. The technology is there to make it possible. It's now, how can we get those drivers here in Australia to see the success here as well? Yeah,
I mean, I can talk a little bit about ASHRAE in that one, projects and success and failures, and fails is a pretty harsh word, but what's sometimes hard in this space is the quality of data that we're receiving. So, for example, like, where do you measure, if it's about environmentals and the comfort in the room, where do you measure the humidity? Is it down low? Is it up high? If we tie into the existing systems, the air conditioning system, which we have via the BMS, the sensors are up high, but the people are, at down low. So this is where maybe cross-referencing more data sources, so you can get a better representation of what's actually happening in the room is necessary.
Yeah. And look, maybe further to that, at least we're on that journey now to be considerate of the information that could be of relevance and deploying the sensors. We've collecting the data now, we can use that data, and as learning models change and things like that, we can use that data better in the future. At least we've got that platform, that we've got that data available to make smarter decisions in the future.
It's also worth asking the users how they're going, because a sensor can say something, but it doesn't actually speak to the comfort levels of the users in that space, and the fact that they're all different. Look, it might sound silly, but if you've just put I want a warmer, I want a colder button, and don't do anything with that except collect the data, you'll end up with a valuable input into the process. As I said before, we have countless examples. We've had to basically weld shut our windows because if people open them because they're too cold, and we feel bad for them. But if we don't do that, then the whole building gets thrown out. In terms of our own energy usage, it's a huge challenge for us, as I said before. We worked out at one stage that if we didn't bring our energy usage down, it would consume the entire university operating budget within 10 years. So we invested in some technologies early on in terms of large chilled water. So we chilled with off-peak power. We chill water and store it, store the cold water in a huge tank. That was done probably about 15 years ago. So we had to do exercises like that. This new campus, we're replacing 30-year-old buildings which are flat and lowly dense populated with one big one which will be built with contemporary standards. So the challenge, that's addressing that. We're knocking down a lot of the buildings, and we're starting that process already. It's been accelerated forward. We've started, some of the buildings are going now because we've had to bring forward a new medical building being built at this campus. Again, it'll be to contemporary standards, so that addresses that to some extent, or to a large extent.
John, just reflecting further on that question, just a challenge has come to mind, and it's a human challenge of the facilities management, in that case, the corporate real estate planning teams and IT actually all working together. That has actually been a significant challenge because everyone's got different sort of outcomes that they're seeking. And I think in the energy play, I think Chris, you mentioned it in a roundabout way. Sometimes the IT team, they deprioritize that. That's not fun for them. But for the building management team, that's their big ticket item. And so getting those three and more stakeholders to play well together for the right outcomes, that has been a challenge. In fact, in all of our clients, I can comfortably say that it's been difficult.
I think, Stephen, the opportunity now is it saves so much money focusing on energy that it can pay for the solution very easily. So the return on investment is quite cool
as well.
Yeah. So if that feature is focused on, and if no one else cares about it for any other reason, that it gets the solution in there for the first place to achieve their goals as well. An extension of that is we always encourage people to get started with the platform, because you can adapt it over time and you can run experiments. And with energy, another thing comes to mind that we're doing with Cisco is one particular client. We are using the platform to try out different energy devices and see the consumption of those devices to decide, for that client to decide what they roll out more broadly. So for example, they're looking at putting solar film on the windows. So it's like a transparent film that is a solar panel, essentially, bringing that back into the grid, and then working out the return on investment to power the lights in that building or in those spaces, and using our platform to compare rooms with that and rooms without that, and then look at the cost of rolling that out elsewhere. And then they can do an easy calculation. Should we roll this out elsewhere, or is the technology more expensive than the energy we're saving? So there's always opportunity to try things out if you focus on underlying technologies and not the pretty interfaces and the apps. Chris, coming back to something I asked earlier, how does digital transformation lower the barrier to entry to universities?
So I guess a lot of it is, making it more accessible, particularly, I guess, with the pandemic, and we saw it here in Australia and globally. the issue around digital divide being a challenge in itself. But by, I guess, forcing institutions to move to a more online presence, enabling it to be more accessible for others, assuming they get access to the devices and the connectivity to do it. And I guess you look at what Cisco's done with Network Academy. A lot of that is opening doors and lowering the barrier to get the education that students want and need a lot easier wherever they may be. But I guess it's that article you're referring to. I mean, it is, I guess, interesting to see what's going to happen over the next 4 or 5 years. It's quite the whole industry is in quite an interesting state, and I think Australia's quite settled comparatively. But particularly in the US, which has such a large number of universities and higher education institutions, it's in quite a state of flux at the moment, where people are still trying to work out what is the new norm and what do they want from their universities. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, and the US is an interesting market where college sports is such a big part of the university experience.
Right.
And then stadium experiences come into play, a whole new set of stakeholders. It's one of the reasons I always say universities are a mini smart city,
Yes.
because they have almost every element of that. Malcolm, a question sort of related to that is, how does a university and a library, how are they similar in their redefining what they are today? And I know I ask this because I know that the NT Library will be a stakeholder of the new campus.
Yeah. So libraries, I mean, and also we've got our own library that'll be in the campus as well. They're, an interesting place. I remember probably 10 years ago, going to a meeting. I was quite shocked that our chief librarian said basically that the books are to do what Sabrina's done, to have a nice display behind you. And if you've got some nice looking books, that's a good thing to have. But in reality, it's all about the IT. And in looking at the NT Library and the requirements that have been mapped out, that they were putting into the space, it's a lot of the same things that we're talking about. It's community engagement, it's running events, it's doing live streams. These are the technologies that are most important for them, is getting out there and working with the public. So I think there's absolutely that there's some parallels to be drawn there in terms of this community engagement and using the space and using a space where you can bring people together for the benefits it gives. And getting back to what we were saying before about lowering the barriers, look, from a pedagogical point of view, our educators have been telling us that the lecture is not, it needs to go. It's not providing value. From an accessibility, if you do your large lectures, if you need to have them because of the way you're coursed, if they're done online, you're not losing anything in terms of interaction, because once you get over the 20, 30, maybe 50 people mark, you're not going to have everyone participating at once anyway. So if you're doing that online, it means that people that couldn't get to the campus or would struggle to get to the campus no longer have that issue at all. And we've had the story of autism. My own son, one of them has a disability as well. That makes it hard for him to participate in large events. Smaller ones where the value's there, where the group is more focused, are important there as well. So getting that technology mix right, absolutely, this digital transformation does drive the engagement, the entry, and also the value.
I've got another question from the live stream from Nathan Ashmore, basically asking about how what we're discussing is ultimately supported. So if we have a larger scope of technology to achieve an integrated smart campus, what are the responsibilities, how are the responsibilities divided up, and who's ultimately responsible for this operationally? Or is this something that right now is too new and is still being worked out?
Well, I can have a crack at that from our current experience. It's an interesting topic, in fact, and so really the client is in effect prime integrator, if I can use that language, in the more recent projects we've done, and then we as entity as a service provider are their first point of call when it's something they can't do, and then and as John Sabrina, we then reach into PlaceOS. If it's a PlaceOS thing, we reach into ProAV. Suncorp will reach into their building management providers. It's complex, but so in the current examples I'm involved with, the client takes the prime integrator role, and it's like any sort of managed support service. But NTT in this particular instance then primes a number of different vendors. So I'll probably get this wrong, and Sabrina can correct me, but we've got FloorSense, VergeSense, there's a bunch of sensor providers that are partners of PlaceOS that we need to bring in. So it's a complex problem, the ongoing supportability of the technology stack. And I think you're right, John. I don't think the maturity is there yet. I don't think there's one single service provider that can currently go, yep, I can do it all for you. It's going to be a group.
And I guess from the university side, let's say like NTT example, NTT is providing support in front of all of those other vendors. But who's the one even calling NTT in the first place? Like, there's so many stakeholders internally at the university because it covers so many things. I guess they all have to have their own process before it's supported by a third party.
And that's the current working example is the Suncorp service desk is taking the call from all the different stakeholders, and then they run through a triage process and push it out to whoever they think is fit, and significant investment and effort have to go into upskilling that, because there's nothing worse, especially lighting up a big building, got 40 stories, all this working, and then something not working well. And then who do you call? So a little example, my wife used this use case and I did role play it through. You got your phone to open your locker. The locker doesn't open, but your car keys are in the locker. It's 5 o'clock. School care is closing at 5:30. What do you do? And they say even worse, battery's flat in the phone. What do you do? So running through those sort of support scenarios that the Suncorp analyst can take the call, know exactly where to route that, and you can assist that person. Because there's a number of different service providers involved in that chain of digital ID, of the actual, I can't remember who did the lockers, the locker, the sensor on the locker, all of that to understand what it is, and the ability to manually override, get the keys out, get the car.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like thinking of it like a user story as if it's a feature that we're developing, and then you don't miss things, and there's opportunity for automation for a lot of that as well, so it can be part of the product. That was going to be my comment, that things support's often included in the model if it's a SaaS product. PlaceOS are doing more packages and more SaaS, and then it's all host supported, but we're not with Smart Campus. There's so many integrations, it's not exactly an off-the-shelf SaaS solution right now. Any final questions to each other before I ask my final question?
I actually had one for Malcolm. You spoke a lot about creating a rich campus as the way to bring people back on campus, and about social connection and community. What are some of the ways in which you guys are implementing or making that a priority? Is it a combination of retail, hospitality, cool uni bars, events management? I'm assuming it's a big combination of all three of those things, or is there something else that I've missed?
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's about the art gallery space. It's about the bookable festival learning space that we're building. It really is in the centre of the CBD. The garden at the front that we've had to have the tree is going to bring in pop-up food vendors, and so it would become a space in the off time, and it's about having that as a destination, not just as a university, and involving the community in all the aspects that are around that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I hadn't considered the art or even the tree as being kind of a destination point for tourism or people who have completely no relation to the uni.
Absolutely, and it is positioned so that they built a new entrance into the city, you'll come into when you enter into Darwin CBD, there'll be an elegant park on the right hand side with Fogs Hollow, and on the right you'll have the campus, and it'll be the transformation of this city experience. So it's quite exciting.
Okay, my final question for each of you is simply, what opportunities are there for smart campus experiences? What are we not doing currently that we could be doing? Or rather, should be doing is the way I should say that.
I'll give it a crack. I think from my perspective, with Cisco networks deployed, they often, more often than not, your digital network or your Wi-Fi network and wired has the greatest reach across the campus or off your real estate. And so, my first call would be to use that platform that's there that has that ubiquitous coverage as a sensor, as a starting point. You leverage that telemetry information that it has to start your journey towards a smart campus, because you've already got it and it's already there. And I think it's been called out in plenty of publications that as students do return, or one of the aspects in return to campus is having that ubiquitous coverage as well, just for connectivity. So use that ubiquitous coverage as a sensor platform.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's tricky to pick one opportunity. I think through today's presentations, we've probably covered about 20 or 30 different features or opportunities or experiences or problems. I do think, sustainability is a really interesting opportunity that can be tackled in a range of different ways. I think that's something that we'll see a lot more of universities approaching, but it's not necessarily a new opportunity. But yeah, I think just picking every opportunity will be different for different universities based on what stage in their digital transformation they're in. So picking any one of the probably 20 or so that we've discussed today will probably be relevant for someone somewhere.
Yeah, and I think, John, and picking up something that Malcolm was saying, starting with the why and the purpose. I think we see our clients diving into let's implement all this technology for technology's sake, as opposed to really challenging yourself as to what do I actually need there? What do the various stakeholder groups need to consume? Why are they interacting with those physical assets? And then that can drive a pathway for your digital transformation, as opposed to just putting in cool meeting rooms, shitloads of Wi-Fi, sensors everywhere. It's like, what are we trying to achieve? If we start with that, you'll get a better outcome.
And the value to the users, not to the it's got to help the students. It's got to help the staff. I see the energy stuff is very important. I think it's more of an opportunity to use the savings that you get from your energy usage to implement a campus that's smart and answers the requirements and engages and makes the students feel that this is the place that they want to be. It enables them to achieve the outcomes that they want, likewise for the staff and the public.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, I think that's a great way to wrap this up. I thank all the panelists for their time, particularly Malcolm for sharing what you're doing with Charles Darwin University. Thanks for everyone joining to the stream. I think we answered the couple of questions that came through.